Under the twinkling stars, the disciples felt an unspoken bond growing stronger as Jesus continued his tale. They had heard stories from Jesus before, stories of parables and wisdom, but never had they felt so intertwined with a lesson. It was as though the story of Eliakim was their own journey, unfolding before them with every word from Jesus' lips. Jesus leaned in closer, his eyes reflecting the serenity of the evening sky. His voice took on a more intimate tone, as though he was sharing a secret that had been carefully kept for this precise moment in time. Eliakim's story does not end there, my beloved friends, Jesus said softly. Though his fields flourished and his home was secure, Eliakim's true journey was only just beginning. For you see, the harvest of the land is one thing, but the harvest of the heart is far more precious and far more difficult to cultivate. The disciples were intrigued. They had assumed Eliakim's story ended with his material success, but now they realized that Jesus was taking them deeper, beyond the surface of what they could see, into the spiritual depths of what Eliakim had yet to experience. One morning, Jesus continued, as Eliakim stood in his fields admiring the rows of healthy crops, he felt an unexpected emptiness in his heart. He had worked hard, he had rebuilt what had been destroyed, but something was missing. The joy he had expected to feel when his fields were full and his family secure had not come in the way he thought it would. He realized then that while he had rebuilt his land, there was still much rebuilding to be done within himself. The disciples listened closely, their hearts stirred by the new direction of the story. Jesus had often spoken of the soul and its needs, but now they could see how Eliakim's outer success had little meaning without inner peace. Eliakim, puzzled by this emptiness, sought counsel from an old friend who lived in the hills, a wise man known throughout the valley for his deep understanding of the human heart. Jesus said. This man was a shepherd named Yorah, who had lived a simple life tending his sheep and spending his days in prayer and reflection. Eliakim climbed the hills to Yorah's small cottage, where the air was cool and the silence was profound, broken only by the occasional bleating of sheep in the distance. Jesus' voice became soft and melodic, as if the scene of Eliakim and Yorah was playing out before the disciples' eyes. When Eliakim reached the cottage, he was greeted warmly by Yorah, who saw the heaviness in his friend's heart. After they sat together for a while in silence, Yorah spoke, "You have done well, Eliam. Your fields are abundant and your family is well cared for. But I see that your heart is troubled. What weighs on you so?" The disciples leaned forward, eager to hear what Yorah might say, for they too had felt the same kind of heaviness after times of success, when they expected to feel contentment but instead found only restlessness. Eliakim looked at his friend with weary eyes. Jesus continued, and said, "I have worked hard to restore my land after the storm. My crops are growing, my family is safe, and yet, I feel as though I have achieved nothing of real worth. I thought that by rebuilding what was lost I would find peace, but instead I feel more empty than ever. Why is this, Yorah? Why do I feel as though I am missing something that cannot be found in the fields or the home I have built?" Jesus paused, letting the question hang in the air. The disciples could feel Eliakim's longing as if it were their own, and they too wondered what the wise shepherd would say. Yorah smiled kindly, Jesus said, and he placed a hand on Eliakim's shoulder. "My friend," Yorah said, "the work of your hands is important, and you have done well. But the work of the soul is even more important, and that is the work you have not yet begun. The storm that ravaged your land was a call to action, a reminder that we cannot wait for tomorrow to do what must be done today. But now you must listen for a new call, the call of your own heart. It is not the storms of life that leave us feeling empty, it is the storms within ourselves. Have you tended to the soil of your soul with the same care that you have given to your land?" The disciples exchanged glances. This was a new lesson, one that resonated deeply within them. They had been focused on their outer work, following Jesus, spreading his teachings, healing the sick, but how often had they neglected the work within their own hearts? Eliakim was silent for a long time, Jesus said. He had never considered the needs of his soul in this way. He had always believed that if he worked hard and provided for his family, he would find peace and fulfillment. But now he realized that there was a deeper work to be done, a work that required more than just physical labor. It required him to face the parts of himself that he had long ignored, the fears, the doubts, the unresolved pain that had been buried beneath the surface for years. Jesus paused, his voice becoming even softer, as though he was drawing the disciples into the very heart of Eliakim's struggle. Eliakim spent many days with Yorah in the hills, he said. They would walk together in silence, sometimes talking, sometimes praying, but always reflecting on the deeper things of life. Yorah taught Eliakim that just as the land must be tilled and cared for, so too must the soul be tended with love and attention. He taught him the importance of prayer, of meditation, of seeking God's presence in the quiet moments of the day. And slowly, Eliakim began to understand that the emptiness he felt was not a sign of failure, but an invitation to go deeper, to discover the peace that could only be found within. The disciples were mesmerized by this new layer of Eliakim's story. They could see themselves in him, in their own restless hearts, in their own struggles to find peace amid their labors. They had thought that following Jesus was enough, but now they understood that there was a deeper work to be done, a work that could only be accomplished in the quiet places of the soul. Eliakim returned to his fields, Jesus said, but he was a changed man. He still worked hard, he still cared for his family, but now he did so with a sense of peace that he had never known before. He no longer saw his work as a means to an end, but as a way to cultivate his relationship with God. Each seed he planted, each fence he mended, was an act of worship, a prayer offered up to the Creator who had given him life and purpose. Jesus smiled as he looked at his disciples, his eyes filled with love. Eliakim found joy in the smallest of tasks, he said. He no longer rushed through his work but took his time, savoring each moment as a gift from God. He would rise early in the morning, not out of a sense of obligation, but out of a deep desire to be present with the Lord in everything he did. And as he tended to his land, he also tended to his soul, praying, reflecting, and seeking God's guidance in all things. The disciples felt a deep sense of peace as Jesus spoke, as though they too were being invited to experience the same transformation that Eliakim had undergone. They realized that their journey with Jesus was not just about the work they did in the world, but about the work they did within themselves, the work of cultivating a heart that was open to God's presence, a soul that was at peace in the midst of life's storms. Jesus' voice grew even softer as he shared the final part of Eliakim's journey. Years later, Eliakim was an old man, Jesus said. His children had grown, his fields were still abundant, and his home was filled with love. But the greatest harvest of his life was not in the crops he had grown or the wealth he had accumulated, it was in the peace that he carried within his heart. He had learned that the true work of life is not just in the fields or in the home, but in the soul. And because of that, he was able to live each day with joy, no matter what challenges came his way. Jesus looked around at his disciples, his eyes filled with love and compassion. "This, my dear friends, is the greatest lesson of all," he said. "Do not wait for the storms of life to force you into action. Do not wait for tomorrow to tend to the things that matter most. Begin today with each small act of love, with each moment of prayer, with each seed of faith that you plant in your heart. For the work you do in your soul will bear fruit not only in this life but in the life to come. And when you stand before the Father, He will not ask you how much you have accomplished in the world, but how much you have grown in love, in faith, and in peace." The disciples were moved to tears by Jesus' words. They had come seeking wisdom and they had found it, not just in the story of Eliakim, but in the deeper call to cultivate their own hearts, to find peace in the midst of their labors, and to live each day with purpose and love. As they rose to leave, the stars shining brightly above them, they felt a deep sense of peace and purpose. They knew that they had been given a precious gift, the gift of understanding that the true work of life is not just in what they do, but in who they become. And with that knowledge they walked back to the village, their hearts light and their spirits renewed, ready to embrace each moment with love, faith, and a deep sense of peace. This is end of the story. Please like this video and subscribe this channel for more Jesus story like this. May the God watch over you.